Antonie van Leeuwenhoek was born on October 24th, 1632 in Delft, Holland, and came from a family of tradesmen. He was first educated as a child in the town of Warmond, and then later moved to live with his uncle in Bentwinzen and was apprenticed to a late linen draper in 1648. He eventually returned to Delft in 1654 and worked as a fabric merchant. At around 1668, van Leeuwenhoek became inspired by Robert Hooke's illustrated book, Micrographia, to create his own microscopes to view microorganisms. However, instead of buying expensive lenses or grinding his own, he discovered a new way to make lenses through melting glass. Instead of laboriously grinding away at some glass to make a lens, van Leeuwenhoek took a rod of glass and heated the middle so he could pull it apart. This created two long whiskers of glass, whose ends he heated to create a very small, high-quality glass sphere. This allowed von Leeuwenhoek to mass-produce powerful microscopes for himself, since he never revealed his innovation to anyone else and allowed the world to believe he was spending most of his nights grinding glass for lenses.
In 1673, van Leeuwenhoek formed a relationship with the Royal Society of London after Dutch physician Reinier de Graaf introduced him. Van Leeuwenhoek began to send copies of his microscopic observations, such as some of his observations on bee mouthparts and stingers. His first big discovery was in 1674, when he discovered some protists in a nearby lake. One such description of a ciliate, Vorticella, read, "In structure, these little animals were fashioned like a bell, and at the round opening they made such a stir that the particles in the water thereabout were set in motion thereby. And though I must have seen quite 20 of these little animals on their long tails alongside one another, very gently moving, with outstretched bodies and straightened out tails. Yet in an instant, as it were, they pulled their bodies and their tails together, and no sooner had they contracted their bodies and tails, than they began to stick their tails out again very leisurely, and stayed thus some time, continuing their gentle motion, which I found mightily diverting."
His next discovery was in 1676, and caused his scientific credibility to be questioned. Van Leeuwenhoek had sent the Royal Society a copy of his first observations of single-celled organisms from his own mouth. These bacteria he had observed were selenomonads, whose existence were completely unknown. In letters he wrote to the Royal Society, van Leeuwenhoek said, "I then most always saw, with great wonder, that in the said matter there were many very little living animalcules, very prettily a moving. The biggest sort had a very strong and swift motion, and shot through the water like a pike does through the water. The second sort ofttimes spun round like a top, and these were far more in number." It wasn't until 1680 that the Royal Society acknowledged van Leeuwenhoek's observations as true, and officially elected him a full member of the Royal Society, though he never attended a meeting in his life.
Around this time, van Leeuwenhoek also observed the vacuole of the cell and later discovered spermatozoa in 1677. He was also the first to see foraminifera, which he said looked like little cockles, no bigger than a coarse sangray. He also discovered blood cells and discovered the banded pattern of muscular fibers in 1682. Van Leeuwenhoek also then went on to discover more microscopic animals such as nematodes and rotifiers. Van Leeuwenhoek went on to showcase his discoveries to the world and even demonstrated the circulation in the capillaries of an eel to Tsar Peter the Great of Russia in 1698. Throughout his life, van Leeuwenhoek had sent about 560 letters to the Royal Society, with the last few letters containing a precise description of an illness he had contracted. This rare disease caused uncontrollable contractions in his midriff and is now named van Leeuwenhoek's disease. He died at the age of 90 on August 26, 1723.